First order of agenda is, before we start, I'd like to introduce the board. We'll start with Christina.
Christina Stankowski.
Dick Schneider.
John Atham.
Anil Vera.
Kathy Slagle.
Emily Boyette, Secretary.
First order of business is approval of the minutes for December 17th and February 18th.
Let 'em early. I'll move they're approved.
Do I have a second?
We'll need to do those one at a time, please.
Okay. All right, so the first one will be December 17th, 2018.
Yes. Oh, wait.
There's two of them,
Oh.
so we just need to do them
I wondered
individually.
why they were so long. Okay, the 17th, I read that one too. I moved that the December 17th be approved.
Okay.
I second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries unanimously. The second order is February 18th, 2019, approval of minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
Okay, second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion
And aye.
carries unanimous. Okay. Our first order of business is BOA 19.02 for 8330 Nichols Avenue.
Chairman, board members, good afternoon. For citizens watching, my name is Buford King. I'm one of the city planners for the city of Fairhope. The items before this board involve requests from citizens or entities involving the city of Fairhope zoning ordinance. The staff members present to the board, review the cases, present the cases to the board for consideration by the board. We may also be joined at the podium by either the applicant themselves or the applicant's representative. So a bit of housekeeping information, board members. We've noticed in some recent meetings where there was some confusion amongst citizens about who's presenting on behalf of what entity. So I appreciate you indulging me just a moment. First case for today, 19.02. This is involving a piece of property on Nichols Avenue at 8330 Nichols Avenue. If you look in your package as well as on the monitors around the room, what I'd call your attention to is you'll notice the piece of property that's zoned R1, low-density single-family, shown there in bright yellow, is the subject property for this case. I'd also call your attention, there's some adjoining properties to the west that are zoned M1. The zoning classification is a bit of a consideration with this case. I'll explain the background information as we go along. What I'd call your attention to here is that you'll notice the subject property has PPIN 214349, which is the parcel ID number assigned by the county, which you see there in yellow. This property is currently going through the zoning change process. It's been heard once by the Fairhope City Council. Final consideration of that zoning change will be on March 25th, and that affects this case right here. Board members, this case has a few complicating moving parts, so if you need to interrupt me during this, please go ahead. Next page in your packet, next slide you have, but here, I'll give you some more background information. We've outlined the subject property in the light yellow that you see there on the right-hand side of the screen. What I'd call your attention to here on this aerial photograph is this is immediately adjacent to the existing Tony's towing operation. And then just to the west of Tony's Towing, you'll recognize the Gaston Lee VFW post. A similar case involving Tony's Towing property was approved a few years ago to the southwest, and you'll see it called out there in this balloon right here. And I'll explain the significance of that momentarily. What I would tell you is the zoning change that we mentioned previously that will be considered next week. That existing property is R1, and as you see on your screen, that it is proposed for M1 light industrial. So what we're here today is to consider a special exception to allow a use of a junk or salvage yard which is an allowable use in M1 zoning, but it's not allowable by right. This board has to hear and consider that request. And we'll move to our next slide. So we've zoomed in a bit on the property. In your packet, the plat, the proposed plat that's in your packet, we'll have it on a future slide, that proposes a future conveyance of property from the subject property owner to the Tony's Towing site. And the desire, and why we're here today, is to allow the junk or salvage yard use currently utilized by the Tony's Towing property on the portion of subject property that is a potential future conveyance. And the use of the Tony's Towing property is the most consistent with a junk or salvage yard. And so, again, that's why we're here today. As you'll see on your slide right there, we go into great detail about the various PPINs, which piece of property is which, and when we get ready to answer questions, we can go back to this slide if we need to for more information. What I'll call your attention to is you see in bold right there that a similar rezoning case and conveyance of property related to one of the properties that we're mentioning here occurred back in 2012, and we referenced the zoning, the case number right there. Let's see, we'll move to our next slide. So, board members, what I'll do here is I'll refer to you, I'll bring to your attention the Planning Commission zoning change, City Council zoning change that we mentioned earlier. So, first of all, the Planning Commission, at its November 15th meeting, they recommended approval of the case number you see right there that would change subject property from R1 to M1. One of the conditions of that approval was, of course, that the use requested for a junk or salvage yard come before this board for approval. Also, the City Council heard the zoning change case for the first time on March 7th. The staff recommendation for that case was approval, which would change that property from R1 to M1. And again, you'll notice that the approval of today's case of BOA 19.02 to allow the use is a condition of approval. And so when the City Council hears that case again next week, what is occurring today would satisfy the condition of approval for that zoning change. And interesting, and as you see at the bottom right there, the staff recommendation for the March 25th, 2019 City Council meeting will reflect the same conditions as you see as was recommended on the 7th. Now, on this slide, try to clarify it a bit further. We've labeled the PPINs on the various properties, and again, the yellow property is the subject property you're considering today. The purple, and I tried to match the current zoning districts, are the Tony's Towing properties. And so you'll notice the two PPINs in purple, they currently include a junk salvage yard use, and Tony's Towing utilizes those properties for their operations. The request seeks to extend.
Question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Okay, looking at the Tony's building is in the purple at 20371.
Yes, ma'am.
What is in the yellow building?
Yes, ma'am. So that building, the property owner there, they utilize that building as an office complex.
The proper?
Yes, ma'am. So the 21439, which we're considering today, so that is one, the subject of the rezoning case. The existing use is an office building. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And so what the intention is, and what the plat you have here, and it's difficult to see on the screen, there is a future conveyance of property of this area that will become part of this property. Okay. So this request would allow them to extend the use, the junk salvage yard use, onto this portion of the property. And all this is contingent upon approving the zoning change that would change this yellow to purple.
Got it.
So
Thanks.
the building will stay owned by
Correct.
the owners now? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So what you would have is the conveyance will cut off this bottom portion of property. This will remain its current use. Now, it'll have its new zoning. It'll remain in its current use, and then this area would be conveyed to the adjoining property owner. So in order to use this piece of property just like this piece of property, the approval you're considering today is required. I think the final comment I have, Chairman and board members, you'll notice that in the lower right area right here, the screening and buffering requirements of the tree landscape ordinance would apply to this piece of property because it adjoins a residentially zoned property to the south. And similar requirements were implemented for this piece of property when its rezoning occurred several years ago. And so, Chairman, board members, the staff recommendation is for this board to approve the proposed special exception for subject property to allow a junk or salvage yard facility as depicted on the drawing in your packet, dated from October of last year, subject to the following condition. And that condition is city council approval of the zoning case rezoning PPIN 206-820 and 214349 from R1 low-density single-family to the M1 light industrial. So one can't exist without the other, and if one isn't approved, the other cannot exist. That way you do not have a fugitive approval or a partial approval. Chairman, council members, chairman and board members, before we have Mr. Tim Lawley with HMR, Hutchinson, Moore and Rao, here on behalf of the applicant, if there's any questions for the engineer. But before we turn that over to the applicant's representative, I'm happy to answer further questions.
I just have one. I noticed that there's, all of these conditions of using the property, but it doesn't say anything about limiting the amount of equipment that is going to be in there, like is there going to be a vehicle crusher in there? Can you bring in other than wrecked cars? How are we going to limit it so that it doesn't turn into the junkyard that you see up on 98?
And Chairman, board members, that's a very good question. Understand that we as staff can only operate within the allowances and requirements of the zoning ordinance. If the zoning ordinance doesn't address it, there's really not a means of enforcing it. I think it's a reasonable expectation that the desired use requested would be very similar to and mirror that of the current use. That perhaps that's best turned over to the applicant or the applicant's representative, but board members, we can only address what the zoning ordinance contains. So there's not any allowance that I can recall of the zoning ordinance having any further limit to this allowance other than requiring the uses requested by this board.
Well, I think we ought to put something in there and that, or at least recommend to the council that they alter this, that if they're going to allow a junkyard in town, to limit the use of it. In other words, you get a vehicle crusher in there, it's going to be kind of noisy, and it's also going to be ugly, and it's going to dump a lot of junk on the ground, et cetera. This is not something we should want in the city. This should be out in the country area where they can hide it with a big old ugly fence.
And Chairman, board members, I'll redirect your attention to the comment on the screen right here, the screening buffering requirements of the tree and landscape ordinance. And so, for the sake of time, did not place every single word of that ordinance in here, but I'm happy to give you a preface. Since this property adjoins a residential area, that would be an incompatible land use. Among the various requirements, the property owner, if they implement this use into operation, they have the options of, one, constructing an 8-foot tall fence, including with that 8-foot tall fence, including various plantings of a specified height and width, usually 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, in addition to a fence, or double rows of plantings of a specified height and width. And I apologize for not having the landscape ordinance with me right this moment. So you have screening and buffering requirements, and of course, the city of Fairhope certainly has a noise ordinance that has to be followed as well. And again, I as a staff member don't want to speak too much on behalf of the applicant, but again, I'll just reinforce that I think it's probably a reasonable expectation that the use that is occurring now would be replicated on this property. Also understand too that the name junk or salvage yard is the best description in the zoning ordinance for the use requested. If there was a different name for the operation that was more closely resembled it, certainly your staff would reflect that.
Mr. Chairman, can
Sure.
I ask? If I remember right, when we approved Tony's, that it was some time after we had another application on something else, but the neighbors that are south of Tony's were very pleased with the buffering and what Tony's has done with the site. They were considering that being very friendly environment. Am I thinking about the same site?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I was not with the city at the time, but when we were researching the case, Ms. Boyette helped us look at the history of the site. And again, I would say that it's a reasonable expectation that how this particular site right here, which is considerably larger,
Right.
how this site has been handled and managed, I would say it's reasonable to say that the expectation would be the same for this site once it is added to their overall property.
And going further, this one thing I'm bringing up, and Dick, I respect this comment, what he's saying, but, for us, only two other things could happen is noise and pollution. And the noise and pollution is controlled by ordinances within the city. And if those ordinances are not, in other words, if they complain, they have a complaint manager going out there and looking at it, and either the people hold up, take care of the complaint, or they get shut down by the city. So there's other mechanisms, I guess, without attaching something else to a zoning ordinance.
But they're not going to open like a recycle shop or anything like that.
Chairman, board members, I can't answer that. I do not know what their above and beyond an extension of the existing operation, I really cannot say. Perhaps the applicant's representative can give us some more information about that.
Well, with that comment about junk, gives me a little bit of concern. Not a lot, but enough to at least bring it up.
Yeah, Chairman, board members, great questions, certainly great questions. And I'm happy to answer any further before if Mr. Lawley would like to address the board.
So, obviously, y'all didn't get anything negative from the neighbors, any emails or anything?
I did receive, oh, that's loud. I did receive 2 phone calls, and they did reiterate what Mr. Avent said, that
In support of it?
yes, they did not have any issues, and that the existing use and business that's being done by Tony's Towing has not created any detriment to them.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Chairman.
thank you.
This time, we'd like the applicant to come up, please. You'll state your name for us.
Good evening, Chairman and board members. My name's Tim Lawley. I'm with Hutchinson Moore and Rowell, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I would like to kind of address some of the questions that y'all have had. It is my understanding that there is no new plans for any different type of operation. They just want to expand their operation of what their current use is. And we have had, this will be the 4th public meeting we've had, and there hasn't been anybody to show up to at all to talk about it, other than the 2 letters received on the initial planning commission meeting, and those were both in support of the operation and what's currently going on there. And I'll be happy to answer any other questions that y'all have.
I have a question. I was at the property and could see how the current 20371 is being used. The 214349, the property under consideration is heavily treed.
It is.
And you will be clearing all those trees except for the buffer then?
That would most likely occur, yes, ma'am.
And the use, as far as I could see, was parking a lot of cars, maybe the cars they've towed, a semi back in the back of it.
That's basically what it is a storage yard they use for their towed vehicles until people come and get them out and take them to the shop or wherever they're going to take them to.
And you believe that that is going to be the purpose of the new property too?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
This time, I'd like to open the meeting to the public portion. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against it? We'll open and close the public portion. I'd now like to open the meeting to the board. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say that we should approve the special exception R1 to M1 for junkyard or salvage yard facility.
No, we're not approving the rezoning.
No, that's
No,
true, just
okay.
this special exception.
Just a special exception.
You're right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Stankowski,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Avent,
Aye.
Vera,
Aye,
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
thank you. Thank you. Our second order of business is BOA 19.03 for 308 Miller Avenue.
Good evening, Board Chairman. My name is Mike Jeffries, planning technician for the city of Fairhope. And as Mr. Veer said, this case is for an accessory structure front setback variance at 308 Miller Avenue. The applicant has requested a variance from the accessory structure front setback, which requires the structure to be built behind the rear building line of the principal structure per the City of Fairhope zoning ordinance, Article 3, Section C.1 in the Table 3.2. The applicant wishes to build the accessory structure even with the front building line of the principal structure and 5.5 feet from the side property line. The applicant has provided supporting drawings showing the proposed location for the accessory structure and a topographic overlay. The next slide gives you an aerial of the zoning on the left and just an aerial overview on the right side of where the property is located. The site's located approximately 250 foot west of the intersection of North Section Street and Miller Avenue. The drawing shows the proposed structure in line with the front building, as I said, and 5.5 foot from the side property line. As you see in a future slide, this piece of property and surrounding property, it goes to Valanta Gully, so it is a steep slope going back to where all the water runoff goes to. Here's where the structures that are currently on the site were constructed around the topography of the property, the house, and there's a pool in the back. The applicant states that this is the flattest part and would require the minimal disturbance to the land that's leading down to Valanta Gully. And as you can see, I don't know how clear it is on your papers there or on the slide, but everything that is on the outside of this property and the adjoining properties are all very steep, and as I said, leading to the gully, Valanta Gully. Analysis and recommendation, the different variance criteria that we're looking at is if there's extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property in question because of its size, shape, or topography. The subject property has a topography that sloped towards Valanta Gully. The principal structure pool are located on the flattest part of the lot. The remaining part of the property behind the rear building line of the principal structure has a worsening slope. B, the application of the ordinance to this particular piece of property would create an unnecessary hardship. Personal financial hardship is not a justification for a variance. Building the accessory structure behind the principal building line would require the removal of several trees and dirt work on the slope that is leading to the gully. And C, such conditions are peculiar to the particular piece of property involved. The site is unique to itself as it's at a dead-end street, and a large portion of the property would require extensive engineering to even think about building upon. And finally, relief if granted would not cause substantial detriment to the public good and impair the purpose and intent of this ordinance, provided, however, that no variance may be granted for a use of land or building or structure that is prohibited by the ordinance. Relief if granted would not cause any detriment to the public nor impair the intent of this ordinance. The property is at a dead-end street, as I said, and it leads to Valanta Gully, which is a heavily wooded area. Additionally, the entire block that the subject property is located on is owned by the applicant and has stated that it'll one day be donated to the city as a park in the future. The lot and surrounding area all drain water to Valanta Gully. By allowing the accessory structure to be built even with the front building line, there'll be less land disturbance to this area around the gully. Staff's recommendation is approval of the variance to allow for an accessory structure to be built be built even with the principal structure. I'd like to go back to the slide where it shows the proposed. It shows here that it's lots 3 and 4. That line in the middle is a pretty historical lot line. That's one lot, it's not 2 lots that they're building the other structure on. And on the topography map, you can see the rest of the property is, the subject property here in the center. The rest of this is all in the same block, is owned by the same person. This is a street that is not in use, and this all goes back into Volanta Gully back here. There are no neighbors or anything behind it. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you'd like.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
On this drawing,
Yes, sir.
where is the gully? What side is the gully on? I can't figure it out.
The gully would
Where
be
is it?
back behind Lot 3, it'd be to the south and to the west.
If you go,
Like, so if you look at that and you look at this
That
drawing, at the topo at the same time,
it's right back here. See
Okay.
that area right
Well, I didn't know I couldn't make head nor tail out of that.
there? Yeah.
yes, sir. I apologize for that.
So the gully, if I were to draw it on here, I would go like from the corner of this proposed building down toward the 132,000 feet. Is that right?
It's 132 feet. If you follow that line down, that gets to the back of their property, and the gully, I don't know exact dimension, but it leads to the gully. They own that property that is behind it. If you look at the map on the screen, the topo here, the end of that this is where the accessory structure is proposing to be built. And if you follow this line 132 feet, this is the end of their property. They own all the property that is in red here, and that's the entire block of this area. All of this is an unopened road. This is the dead-end street of Miller. All of this is part of the gully, the Volanta Gully here. All this where the mouse is moving is
Well, with
the
all
gully.
this area, why does he have to,
Because the topo,
Because it leads back to a gully, so it's on a very steep slope.
it's on a steep slope.
Going back.
Here's the shop here, and the land would drop like this.
So if you look at the topo lines there, Dick, the flat part where the house is, they're very far spaced apart. Tells us that the land is flat there, and as you get closer to the edge of that gully and the edge of their backside of their property, and even the southwest corner of their property, the topo lines get a lot closer together. The closer the lines, the steeper the slope, making it hard to build without some great feat of engineering, building it on stilts or digging out a lot of ground. And as you can see from the aerial, all that area, there's lots of trees and it's heavily wooded, which kind of helps protect that gully area from erosion and excess runoff.
so there really won't be any drainage problem?
No, sir, it'll all go to Volanta Gully.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to open the portion to the applicant. Is the applicant here? Okay. Open and close. Is there anybody from the public? We'll open the public portion. All right, we'll close the public portion. Is any comments amongst the board? Do I have a motion?
I move that the request be approved because of the topography of the property.
Okay. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, roll call vote, please.
Stankowski,
Aye.
Aye.
Snyder, Avent,
Aye.
Vera,
Aye.
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Our last case of the evening is BOA 19.04, 214 Rock Creek Parkway.
Good evening, Chairman, Board. This is case 1904 Rock Creek Parkway, and this is for a rear setback variance. The applicant is requesting a variance from the rear setback of the principal structure per the City of Fairhope zoning ordinance, Article 3, Section C.1, Table 3.2. The applicant wishes to build a sunroom that is attached to the house over top of an existing patio. Rock Creek is a planned unit development or a PUD, and the setbacks for the subject property is a front setback of 30 feet, a side setback of 10 feet, and a rear setback of 35 feet. The applicant has provided a survey showing the proposed dimensions and location of the addition. The addition would be at a 26.5 foot from the rear property line. Up on the screen, you see on your left is an aerial of the zoning, and on the right is just an aerial overview of the site. The site's approximately 300 feet west of the intersection of Rock Creek Parkway and Clubhouse Drive. This drawing shows a proposed structure being built over top of the existing tile patio, and there's currently a pergola there. The red line is, I tried to clear up a little bit, there's a lot of lines that were on the survey with the topo lines and everything. The red line is the existing rear of the house. The area highlighted in yellow is where the proposed addition to the sunroom is going to be. And then there's currently a stone patio that would be outside of that, but there's no issue with that. And I said it encroaches into the rear setback by 8.5 feet. The applicant states that due to the topography of the property, the house was constructed towards the front of the lot. I've included an aerial overview with a topographic overlay showing the different topography. And you can see for that lot there that's highlighted, the flat part is towards the rear of the house, so there's a steep slope that fronts towards the road. The analysis and recommendation going through the criteria. There are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property in question because of its size, shape, or topography. The subject property has a topography, like as I said, the front of the slope towards the street. The surrounding properties, however, have the same characteristics. The application of the ordinance to this particular piece of property would create an unnecessary hardship. The hardship for the request is partly due to applicant's health needs, which is not recognized by the zoning ordinance. Such conditions are peculiar to the particular piece of property involved. The conditions are not particular to this site alone, as the surrounding properties all have the similar topography. Relief, if granted, would not cause substantial detriment to the public good and impair the purpose and intent of this ordinance, provided, however, that no variance may be granted for a use of land or building or structure that is prohibited by this ordinance. Relief, if granted, would impair the purpose and intent. The PUD was created for the overall development by making Rock Creek a PUD instead of a regular residential zoning district. It allowed the developers to create different setbacks for the different areas in the subdivision, taking different variables such as topography into account. Staff empathizes with the applicant wanting the variance based on health needs. The zoning ordinance, however, does not recognize any health need as a hardship, and the extraordinary conditions that the topography may pose is not particular to the subject property, but is shared by the surrounding properties. Staff's recommendation is for denial for the request to build outside of the required rear setbacks. I'd be happy to answer any questions or go back to any slides.
Would you
may
go
wish.
back over to part about the organization that built Rock Creek? Is that a
It's-
homeowners type thing?
No, sir, a PUD is a planned unit development. It's a zoning ordinance. The developer comes to the planning commission, city council, and
Well,
request.
what did they say about this?
The PUD was approved, which allowed them, when it was approved, to give out different setbacks throughout the neighborhood. So some lots
okay.
have different front and different rear setbacks. There's
I got it.
not an issue with that. That was approved years ago, and we're still approved PUDs now. It just allows kind of different, the developers are more creative way of putting houses and developments together to allow different settings throughout the neighborhood. And it could be based off of rivers or natural features that are in the neighborhood. It gives them some flexibility when creating a development to allow contractors, when they build homes, to diversify a neighborhood.
Don't these setbacks meet R1?
Yes, sir. These are similar setbacks to an R1.
Mike, have a
Anyhow.
So when any building goes on in Rock Creek, does Rock Creek, do they have an architectural board that has to approve or say, or give them their blessing or not give them their blessing?
Rock Creek, in there, the city doesn't look at an architectural review committee or any homeowner associations or property owners association. For this particular piece of property, they have, Ms. Fleming did provide documentation that Rock Creek does not have a problem with this. However, she had to come in front of the Board of Adjustments because the house is currently built to the very rear of the property setback line at the 35 feet and is now wishing to build 8.5 feet further into the setbacks, which requires a variance from the Board of Adjustments.
So how far is this house from the front yard? Is it 30, or is it 35 feet from the
Well,
front?
the setback is 30
30.
feet, but
30 feet.
the house is built,
In the back because of the
is
topography?
closer to the back. And I got the aerial up there, you can see where the house in the shaded area is
Can you
built.
pull up this one? I
Absolutely.
can't read it on this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Nobody can read it. I don't know why we get
Yes.
stuff like
I have a
that.
question.
Is
We'll
the
go.
back part, the existing, is it covered presently?
No, currently not, it just has a pergola that it's open to the sky, which is well within the zoning regulations.
Okay, Ms. Lago?
Are you saying, Mike, that, and I can ask the applicant if they're here, that they did go to the POA board and the Rock Creek POA board approved this?
Yes, ma'am, that is true.
Surprised.
So why would they do that? I mean, why would the Rock Creek, okay.
I sit on the board of
Okay.
directors for the Rock Creek.
Harry, would you stand up, please? Thank you.
My name is Harry Kohler. I'm a resident of Rock Creek. I also sit on the Rock Creek Board of Directors, Rock Creek Property Owners Association Board of Directors. The Architectural Review Committee considers only aesthetics and building materials. That's the limit of the items considered in
just what it
making their
looks
approval. They do not, any city ordinance the applicant has to come to the city for a variance there. That is something the Architecture Review Committee does not get involved in.
Okay, so basically, y'all just look at what it looks
Yep,
like?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
That's the extent of our approval.
Okay.
Harry, before you go down, you're very familiar with this area then, if, et cetera. Are other people got things that are in violation of our code?
No.
No, if they do, they would have had to come before this board for approval.
If I can, we did have a case a couple years ago from Rock Creek that was denied due to, it did not meet the spirit of the ordinance, and it was also based on a physical hardship, which of course the board does not recognize.
We did.
So basically, this would be setting a precedent. Is that what you're saying?
We don't have precedents.
We don't have a precedence here.
Pardon me?
Our board doesn't set precedents.
Well, but if you allow somebody to do it,
Well, ours is a case-by-case.
Each case is
basis.
reviewed on its own merits.
Yeah.
That's why the criteria is broken down to where it must pertain to the particular
but
piece of
wait a minute.
property in question.
if you're in a neighborhood and the guy next door builds something and you deny the one guy, don't you think we'd wind up with a lawsuit?
I can't answer that. If the
Well,
board
I can
follows,
answer it. You would wind up with a lawsuit, and we've had a few of them.
well, then, this is the criteria that's on the screen, is what the board reviews and goes by, and that's where it strictly outlines that it's for the particular piece of property in question, which is why, as staff, we try to point out the differences if that piece of property does have a particular physical restriction to itself, that it's there, or if it does not, to point that out as well.
All right.
I got
And-
one question.
Yes,
So
sir.
the front of the house has to be 35 feet from the road, is that correct?
30
feet.
Yes, sir.
And how far is the front of the house from this property? Do we know?
I don't know the exact dimension, and I
Read that. It's
and I
too
took
small.
the,
I'll be really impressed if you can.
54.5 feet.
Honest to God, you can read that?
Man, I'm Superman.
So it's 54.
You must have saw a full-size drawing and remembered it.
The front house is 54.9 feet from the front
From
line.
from the road,
No,
okay.
I missed by 4/10 of a foot.
That's close enough for this work.
So in reality, when they first built the house, they should have pushed it closer to the road. If that's what you want.
Because of the slope.
They could have, but they chose to build on the flatter part that was towards the rear portion of the land. Looking at the aerial, you can see the other houses where they're situated compared to that house and their topography, whether it's similar or not. Some of them chose the corner lot on lot 153 that's in green. Their entire lot slopes evenly back towards the golf course, and they built right in the middle of it. So they took it to build their house accordingly, whether it was on blocks or built it up or did whatever it was needed to do to be able to
It looks
build
like all
that
these
layout.
houses are pretty much in line.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, and also, if you see the property, it's from the road, it slopes uphill. And I believe the house seems to have been built is probably as close to the top of that slope as it could have been at the time. All the houses have driveways that go up.
Okay.
That's my look at it.
And Ms. Fleming is here, the applicant is here to answer any question that the board may have as well
Okay.
and speak.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Now open it to the applicant to make a presentation. If you'll state your name and address for us.
My name is Jan Fleming. Good evening, Chairman, Board, and the board members. Some things that you all have asked questions about. I have a statement to make, but I would just like to answer those. This is my approval from Rock Creek. It is in the packet, I assume.
So let me make this clear. So
my-
the
my-
approval is just for the
POA.
visual look of it. Is that correct, Mr. Kohler? Okay.
Well, it goes into much more detail than just visual look.
Okay.
Could you speak up a little bit
Yeah.
or talk into the mic?
I'm sorry. As mentioned, the setback from the front is 54.9. That's to the corner of the garage. The garage is 30 feet, so that'd be 84.9 where the actual house starts. So it was set back very far, and that's why the space in the back is so limited. I have, to start with, I have approval from both my adjacent neighbors' signed statements. I have pictures to show how far it is set back. I'd like to show those to you. The setback and also the elevation. Can you see from here, or can I pass them around?
If you can come a little closer.
Some of them show the setback, and then there are a couple here I just want to point out. This is a neighbor on one side, where they would not be able to see at all. You can see the foliage. This is a neighbor on the other side, so when you go through these pictures, you can see what I'm saying. This is the steep elevation, and the rest of the pictures show the setback of the house. You can go through these. They all show how far setback it is, and that's what's created the problem. Okay, I would like them back, but you can pass them around.
Okay.
And then I'd like to make my statement.
Yeah, could you show us that drawing you have, or,
The survey?
yeah? Let us look at that. I'd like to see what the hell's going on. Yes. Yeah, you gotta look at those.
Whenever you're ready, shall I speak, or do you want to just look at
Go
those?
by it 10 times a day.
You can speak.
Do you want to look at this?
Are you the original owners?
Yes,
It's a lot clearer than what
I'm not
we
the
have.
original owner, but I'm the present owner. See, if the builder had chosen to put it further forward like most houses, then I wouldn't have this issue. And also, on Rock Creek Parkway, the 216, I'm 214, 216 is also steep, but the rest of them are not. They're much more on the level. So I definitely have a unique situation with my lot at 214. Anyway, I would like to address the reason for my application to your Board of Adjustments. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Due to the hardship that exists, I believe I have met all the criteria that the Planning Department has given me. I will show in words and photos 4 salient points. Number 1, criteria A. There are extraordinarily exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property because of its topography. The topography of Lot 169 is unique because of the 15-foot elevation above the road. 2, this has caused the deep setback of the house, which created the lot line discussion. 3, my pictures show the steep elevation, the house setback, and the neighbors not being affected. They will be unable to see enclosure due to heavy evergreen foliage and sighting of each house. I also have signed supporting statements from both adjacent neighbors, lots 168 and 170. 4, criteria D, relief would not cause detriment to the public good nor impair the purpose and intent of this ordinance. I am asking the Board of Adjustments to consider the following. Number 1, topography, i.e., the peculiar and distinctive elevation. 2, I should not be penalized for the location of the house by original builder. From the back of the proposed enclosure, I will still be 27 feet from the property line. And there's nobody's house in the back, it's a golf course. 3, no detriment nor impairment to the public good. The right to own property is a human right to legal persons for peaceful enjoyment of his possessions, subject to the payment of taxes, which I do, to maintain the dignity of the individual and of the home. I believe I have met the litmus test, and I'm hereby asking the Board of Adjustments to grant the permit to enclose a pre-existing patio nestled in the back corner of the L-shaped house, and to allow me to maintain my dignity. Since it is beyond the scope of the Planning Department, is giving a variance not the very function and leverage the Board of Adjustments is authorized to exercise. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time, I'd like to open the public portion of the meeting. Is there anybody for or against?
I have to keep them since you passed them. They'll become part of the record.
No, I cannot let you keep them. I'll give you copies. I have to have them back. I need to get copies.
I can scan them and give them
Okay.
back to you.
Okay. 'Cause
Okay.
I definitely need a copy of them.
That's fine.
Okay. And then there was one other thing,
Your survey.
I just handed you that.
okay.
That's right there on top.
There was, I don't know if a letter from, I have those letters. Did you,
No, ma'am.
from the neighbors, okay. Thank you.
We'll open and close the public portion.
I would like to speak to I did receive a telephone call from a neighbor. I don't know which one. They didn't want to tell me their name or where they lived, but they received a letter, and they did not want to start the trend of people building closer to the golf course.
Or to the property, okay.
Is the golf course right behind your property?
Yes.
Golf course.
Yep, that's it right
But I
there.
saw-
Please come to the microphone, please.
But is that where her property is?
Yeah, this is her
The golf
backyard.
course is way in back. It's 27 feet from where this enclosure would be. It's still quite a distance away.
If you look at the screen.
I did not hear what the secretary said.
I received a telephone call from an adjacent property owner that was not in support of the request. They did not want to start a trend of people building closer to the golf course.
Well, it's a funny thing, but across the golf course to the right, there is a huge structure, like a swimming pool, diving arrangement or something. It's enormous. So that has been put in there. So I don't think that there are no variances in Rock Creek. I believe there are many variances, to be honest with you. So I don't think it's going to be any precedent. I think there are variances already in there. That's my
Emily, does the
impression.
swimming pool fall under different?
Yes, accessory.
Yes, that's an
So
accessory
it's-
structure.
So that's not part of the main building?
Correct.
Okay.
To my knowledge, and I've been on the board many years, we've only had one case from Rock Creek asking for a variance, and it was denied.
Can I ask y'all, it looks like, and I don't know if it's right or not, but that she would still be able to have a 10-foot sunroom and to be in keeping with the setbacks, is that right?
If where now?
Could she still do a 10-foot deep sun porch?
No, currently the rear of her house is built right up to
It's
the
35
rear.
feet, okay.
Let me see if I can get back to
Okay.
the red line, here,
That's
this is the corner of the house, this is the rear setback line that goes through here.
Okay.
So it's already built to the max, so anything that goes out more than what's already there is going to be across the rear setback line.
Mike, what's that 4.8? So actually, she can come out 4.8 from the back of the house, is that correct?
It's, no, the rear, it's not the whole way, she'd come out 4.8 feet, could come out, and that would still be within,
The setback.
within the setback, yes, sir.
So she could, she needed a 4.8, it's kind of
But
useless.
it's not going to be 4.8 all the way down. I think the house is not angled with the side property line the way it's oriented on the lot. So I think it gets narrower as you go towards the end of the house. So you end up at 4.8 feet, maybe less than 4 feet, I believe.
So if she needs a sunroom, I guess the front would be the only place she could put one, possibly.
Could possibly do the front or a detached sunroom.
Okay. Like an accessory building?
Yes, sir. And that would be 5 foot off the rear and 5 foot off of the side. And then, since it was brought up, the golf course, just in a recent planning commission, they were mentioning several golf courses, that land use no longer being golf courses, and the golf course actually being able to make more money from selling lots, turning their 18 holes into parts of the subdivision. So we've taken that into consideration of a golf course is not landlocked and not defined as a golf course forever. That is a potential piece of property that could be developed in the future.
So potentially there could be lots behind that,
Yes, sir.
behind her.
There could be potentially.
So basically, if I'm looking at this right, you really are not talking about a 10-foot variance. You're talking about, what, about 6 feet?
8.5 feet.
8.5 feet.
Yes, sir. Looking at the drawing, the furthest corner, hard to see on this computer screen, but let me. The furthest corner of the two corners of the proposed sunroom is 26.8 feet and 26.7 feet off of the rear property line, and the setback is 35 feet. So they're going to be roughly, I talked to the contractor, and he had said 26.5 feet to give them a little leeway in construction, and he said that was fine, which gives you 8.5 feet built into that setback line.
Well, in light of the way this thing's been described, this sounds like a very reasonable request to me.
Yes, sir?
I have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I see your point for the denial.
Yes, sir.
I really do. But I'm also trying to figure out, and you can help me with this, hopefully, what's the difference between this variance and the one we just gave on the storage building that's out front?
The one before would be, in my opinion, and looking at the way the ordinance is written, is that the case before it was to that particular piece of property. There weren't properties across the street or next door that were sharing in the same constraints of the property with the topography being placed on it. The setbacks in that area were, after that house was built, before there was even any zoning in that area. So the difference being that it's peculiar to a certain piece of property, not to 4 or 5 houses or 6 houses that are in a general area. Now, could you find a piece of property similar to the one before somewhere in Fairhope? There's a lot of dead-end streets and lots of bluffs and gullies, so that's a possibility. But the surrounding area, they did not all share the same physical characteristics that that piece of property had.
And that the former, when we discussed, the property owner owned all the property around
Yes, ma'am.
the house.
So before they were building on the only area that was buildable that they completely owned, and they owned everything surrounding them. And then it backs up to a gully that we know is not going to be developed in the future or have anything constructed upon it.
If they're gonna chop up the golf course and everything, there's gonna be all kind of changes in this neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
What is the impact of allowing this? Tell me what the impact is. Is it just the fact that we're violating a city
City ordinance, city law?
ordinance?
Yes, sir.
But that's what we're here for.
That's why it's brought in front of the Board of Adjustments. As a staff member, I can only look at it as the zoning ordinance is written and give a recommendation based off the interpretation of the zoning ordinance.
It seems like a very reasonable request, even though it's a minor violation, in my estimation, one that you would never even see with all the trees around it and everything else. It makes absolutely no sense to deny something like this. I don't understand it.
Again, as I said, that's why it comes before the board. You have the authority and the power to change the laws of the city, the zoning ordinance, whereas as a staff member can only look at the current zoning ordinance as it is written and make a recommendation based off of that.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Mike, I have a
Yes, ma'am.
question as your interjection that the golf course might be chopped up. Where are you getting that information from?
We just recently had, our last planning commission meeting, had a 3-lot subdivision on Lakewood. The golf course divided up part of their property into 3 more lots and sold it off.
Okay, but that's not Rock Creek.
No, man, it's not, it's just you asked where it came from, is another golf course
Right.
that was selling off property, and the planning commission made comments that they heard of other areas that have been doing the same.
Timber Creek did some too.
Possibly, I wasn't aware of that one,
Yeah.
but they just made mention that was.
But it has not been mentioned for Rock Creek, has
No,
it?
ma'am, I wasn't
No.
meaning that, not in a year or 5 years, I don't,
No.
but it's just not a cut and dry golf course is off
It's
limits
happened in other
to
areas.
development.
I
I
understand,
still
I just
like
wanted
it.
to
Yes, ma'am.
clarify
Right, right,
that
but not.
that
Yes,
is
ma'am.
I
not
don't
right
get
now
me.
in the plans.
No, nothing proposed at all for Rock Creek, nothing like that.
No.
Just brought up that it's not a set in stone land use of golf course.
Right.
It's always open to subdivision and rezoning if needed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The applicant, if you'd come up, please. Sure.
I wasn't intending to bring this up because the planning department has already told me they do not consider this, but this was the basis for why I even need a sunroom. It isn't a frivolous reason. It is because, and I have a letter from my doctor, which is in your packet, stating that I need it because there is so much rain here and I don't get enough sunlight for a situation that I have as far as my health goes. And I know they don't want to consider that, and that's not part of their consideration at all, but that is the basis why I even came to this point of needing this sunroom. And it's, just enclosing the existing patio. It's not going to go further. So, and I have the doctor's letter here if you'd like to see it. It should be in your packet.
The board, medical reasons is not a reason
I
for the board
realize, that's
to-
why I said I did not bring it up. But I just wanted to let you know, it's just not because I want to put some furniture out there.
Sure.
It is for a valid reason. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion with the board members?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to accept staff recommendation for BOA 19.04.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay. We'll take a roll call vote, please.
Just to reiterate, the staff recommendation is the request be denied.
For denial.
Stankowski,
Aye.
No.
Snyder, Avent,
Aye.
Vera,
Aye.
Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries to deny.
Last order of business for us is we're taking a vote on the officers for next year.
I want to make Troy shrunk. No, I can't. Where's Troy?
Daphne.
We kicked him out of Fairhope?
They kicked him out of Fairhope.
We liked him too much to kick him out.
That's right.
Also, I want to, Buford, you and Mike did an excellent job on all
Did.
this. The first one would have been very complicated if you hadn't explained it as well as we did.
Thank you, Chairman, board members, thank you for that. I think you're noticing an emerging pattern in the types of cases that Buford King reviews.
Just don't explain impact anymore. I mean, that's.
Do
no,
we-
density impact.
Compatibility analysis.
Yes,
Chairman,
compatibility
board members.
analysis.
Do we have any nominations for chair?
Madam Secretary, I nominate Anil Vera.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vice chair?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Kathy Slagle for vice chair.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Secretary?
Do we have a good one?
I don't know. Maybe you can find one.
As long as we don't get that Emily for you.
Make a motion for Emily Boyette to stay as secretary.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's it. We do have some cases for next month, so we'll see you again.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Motion to adjourn.
Dinner time.
Dinner time.